Hello. In this video we're going to discuss how God survived and made discoveries part 4. In this video we're going to talk about the first star and its impact on the planet heaven where God and angels were living. So God created 2 batches of angels. There's 5,000 in each batch. The first batch of 5,000 angels are called Gabriel. The second batch are called Angel. And among the second batch was the first female, who was Angela. She was later killed in an incident on that planet. And later God started creating the first female batch named after Angela, and among them was the first female, Mary. So while all this is happening on this planet, God and the angels live naked. The environment is mostly inside in tunnels and caverns, chambers. God every week, every 4 days, had to go to the furnace and turn it off if it was going, or turn it on. So he would know that it was time to go back there and turn it off when it started getting too hot where they were. So they lived on a planet in the dimension that they were in. There was a light that was exactly the same as the work light at the work site, and that's how they got light, and they could go outside and play tag. That is the most popular sport back then. Then God noticed that there were cracks forming inside his furnace and that he was going to lose it. He had to do something about it. So he started creating the first star, which is essentially a furnace that he would not have to ever do any more maintenance with. So he wouldn't have to turn it on or turn it off. He would simply have to turn it on and leave it going, and everything would be fine. So this planet that they were living on did not have planet rotation either. It just simply had a furnace, and that was it. So God created a shell and then cut holes into it to emit the fuel. He lined the shell with catalyst, and then he created another dimension, which is quite massive, and filled it with the fuel that he uses for the furnace. A better, more improved version which had a smoother flame. And God put a wormhole entry point in that dimension, and inside of it he placed gravity element which did not go through the wormhole. He left it just outside, and it did not go through, it just sat there. And it pulled fuel, and then the fuel went through it, and then the exit point was inside the star. The fuel oozed to the surface. The star shell had a wormhole, had a gravity element on it, and it had gravity of 1g. The fuel rose up into the atmosphere and then combusted in the upper atmosphere of the star. So there's no air there. It would have been consumed by fire anyway, but there is an atmosphere, and this produced the first star, which is still going to this day. That star was extremely powerful, and the planet heaven was too close. There was emergency on the planet where the angels were, and they had to evacuate. It was so hot. God closed off the tunnels and put everyone, including Jesus, who was born back then, this was 450 billion years ago, God put everyone into a chamber which he used at his work site, which was 400 feet by 400 feet and was not made of wormhole element. So it's made of something else, and this is where God used to rest. God put everyone inside there and then had to find a way to make it possible for them to go back to their planet. So when we look at this planet, it does not rotate. So it does not have heat distribution, and you have a star in the system. The surface grew extremely hot, 4,000 degrees Celsius. So God had a problem with this. No one could go back to that planet. With the tunnels sealed off, it was still extremely dangerous, and eventually the heat would get down there. So what God did was try to cool the planet by putting a wormhole exit point that emitted water onto the surface. What this produced was steam, which quickly rose up into the air and formed clouds. When the clouds formed, it produced a wind that went over 4,000 miles per hour. The wind pushed over the furnace, which was 4 kilometers high. It was an epic disaster. God could still not go outside, and the temperature outside was still extremely hot. You could not go out there anyway. So now we have a situation where the angels are inside a chamber and cannot come out, and the planet that they'd been living on the surface was unlivable. So God had to do something about this. What God had found was that at one point he had accidentally produced wind, and he discovered that gravity countered the effect of the wind. This was an accident when God was creating a shell and he was walking around on the outside. And unbeknown to him, some gravity element was facing the wrong way and it pushed him. And then he found that as he was moving, some gravity element pointing towards him slowed him down. And so based on this theory, God believed that he could slow wind down. So this is the beginning of the creation of the first moon. And so God created a shell and put gravity element on it. And also experimented with planet rotation. So God believed that if the planet rotated, it would evenly distribute the heat and it wouldn't be so hot. So the first moon was an experiment in order to slow the wind and also planet rotation. The experiment succeeded in showing God that a moon could indeed slow the wind down. But it was still too hot to go outside because there's no heat distribution from the star. And so God had to start again and make a new heaven. So God created a new shell and put gravity element on it, and some of them were facing to the east. Then when the two shell halves were mated together, God put layers of rock and sediment, and once he was happy with it, he then put it through a wormhole into the same dimension as heaven, and then made adjustments until he got the planet just right distance from the star. The planet rotated as planned, and God was blown away by how awesome it looked. The first moon was also created and put into orbit. It did not rotate, but emitted a gravity field which is designed to slow the wind down of the weather system to make it livable. And so upon doing this, God filled the atmosphere of the planet heaven with air, and then put water on it, the water turned to steam and rose up into the upper atmosphere and formed clouds, but the moon stabilized the weather system. That planet still exists to this day. The environment is like Ireland during winter, and that is where God, Mary, Jesus, and the angels, and myself lived in the very first history, 400 billion years ago. I'm the Archangel Daniel, and I'm from heaven.